I'm Danny from Factor Electronics. Thanks for joining us today. Today I'd like to introduce you to the Factor V66 complete multi-room system. The V66 provides 6 stereo amplifiers and can provide sound in an entire home. The V66 can be controlled by keypads, an IR remote control, or a smartphone. So let's take a closer look at the V66, and for professional installers, please stay to the end of the video and we're going to have some installation tips for you and some complete wiring diagrams. The V66 features a thick anodized aluminum front panel. It's very simple in the front panel. You have a power switch and you have 6 LEDs that tell you when a zone is on, in standby, or in clip mode. The V66 also includes professional rack kit, so it can be rack mounted, or the rack mounting ears can be removed if it goes into a customer's AV cabinet. So if we take a close look at the back panel, let's start on the far right. On the far right you'll see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sets of dual RCA jacks. These are preamp outputs. So every single amplifier in the V66 also provides a line level output that can be taken to other amplifiers. Now when I mentioned commercial background music jobs and restaurants and hotels, you would use these preamp outs to go to a 70 volt amplifier, a large amplifier. I mean, one of these preamp outs could be taken to a 5,000 watt amplifier for a huge convention center or something like that. And the V66 can be used as a main controller. The V66 also includes 6 high quality stereo amplifiers, and you'll see the connectors here are removable terminal block connectors. So you just pop the connector off, put your wires in, screw them down, and then pop it back in and you're ready to go. Also, each amplifier can be run in stereo mode, or it can be flipped over to bridge mono mode. So you can have some of these amplifier channels in bridge mode and some in stereo mode. An instance where you might, an example of where you might do something like that would be in a restaurant, for instance, where you might have some washroom speakers. You could put this into bridge mono and you could power all your hallway and washroom speakers off of one zone of the V66, and that would have its own separate volume control, its own separate treble and bass control, and also its own source selection, which can be independent. So if we move over here, you'll see that there's 4 sets of RCA jacks on the input side. There's a 3.5 millimeter jack, and then input number 6 has a 3.5 stereo jack, and it also has an optical SPDIF input for digital optical inputs. So these are your inputs into the amplifier. So inputs could be anything. They could be a CD player, a Blu-ray player, a music server. They could be a Wi-Fi streamer. It could be multiple Wi-Fi streamers. You could in fact have 6 Wi-Fi streamers connected to this amplifier and have 6 independent Wi-Fi streams, 1 in each zone. Now moving along, there's also a trigger, 12 volt trigger section. 12 volt triggers are used for controlling other pieces of equipment. Now for instance, each zone 1 through 6 has its own 12 volt trigger. So where would I use a 12 volt trigger? Let's say in a theater room where I had a motion picture screen that had a 12 volt trigger input. I would connect this to the 12 volt trigger input on the screen and maybe even on my projector. And when I turn that zone on, the projector is going to turn on and the screen is going to automatically come down. So any amplifier or any piece of equipment that has a 12 volt input can be controlled directly from the V66. Now we have a very comprehensive IR section. And where the IR section is used is when you want to control another device. For instance, if I had an AM/FM tuner or a CD player and it had IR controls, I could just go into a room where I had a keypad, I could point my CD player remote control at that keypad, and it's going to take the IR signal all the way down the Cat5 cable to the amplifier. Here it's going to come out to a flasher, and you're going to be controlling that input device remotely in any room of the house or the business or establishment that you're working in. Then we have some other very interesting 3.5 millimeter jacks. This is a PA in. If 12 volts is presented at the PA in, input 1 will override all other inputs. So you could use that for a doorbell system, a front door intercom system, where it would have a relay that would trigger 12 volts into here, and then who's ever at the front door, the intercom system would provide an audio input into the amp, and you'd be able to hear that in every room of the house. The other The use for that would be for commercial paging, for instance. So if I had a relay connected to a microphone switch, I press the microphone switch, 12 volts goes into the PA in. Now input 1 is where my microphone would be connected, and that's going to override all the other inputs in the amplifier. There's a mute in, so if you had to emergency mute the amplifier from, say, a fire system, all you need to do is put a voltage into the mute in, 12 volts, and it'll mute the entire amplifier. And there's another output here that provides 12 volts out. So as soon as the amplifier is turned on, there's 12 volts present at this jack. That 12 volts can be taken to a switch and then fed back into the PA in, so it actually provides its own 12 volt output that can be used to trigger the override for input 1. Sounds a little complicated, but if you have any questions, you can always call us here at Factor and we can explain the best way to set up your V66. Now, as I mentioned before, the V66 is a 6-zone system. It can also be expanded to up to 18 zones using this little ribbon cable, which comes with the V66 kit. You plug in the ribbon cable to this amp, you connect it to the second amp and to the third amp, and voila, you have 18 zones of audio. We also have an RS-232 connector. This RS-232 connector can be connected to master control systems like Control 4, Compass Control, RTI. The list goes on and on and on. There's thousands of home automation systems out there that will provide RS-232 controls, and the V66 can be controlled from your master system. We also have a device called the V66 Wi-Fi that allows you to control the V66 with your smartphone, and that can also be connected to the RS-232 jack for complete control. The keypads plug into this one single RJ45 connector, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. The V66 has a very clean installation. Every keypad is connected using a Cat6 cable, and you can have runs of up to about 250 feet using a good quality Cat6 cable terminated in either 568A or 568B, and we'll provide some examples of that later on in this video. So what happens is you have one single Cat5 that goes from here to the wall, and then the V66 comes with a keypad controller where everything plugs into the back of the hub, and then you just have one clean single Cat5 or Cat6 cable plugging into the back of the amp. Of course, we have our AC input here. Then moving down to the bottom, this switch designates whether the V66 is a master, a slave 1, or a slave 2 unit. So if you were to have 1, 2, or 3 units combined, you would set up each amp respectively where it is in the signal chain. One other thing I'll mention about the expansion of the V66, when you use the expansion cable, you only have to put your sources into the master input, the master amp, I should say, and then the input sources are all automatically ported down to the other amplifiers using this cable. So you don't need to wire off your sources to amp 1, 2, amp 3. That's all done internally inside the V66. Then we have a switch called the Agc Switch, and that's automatic gain control. Now, some sources can overload the inputs on the V66, like if you were using the output of a smartphone, which is headphone level, which could be, up to a watt, which is about 2.83 volts. And that can overload some inputs. So if you flip this switch on, what'll happen is it acts as a soft compressor, and it'll bring the level of the input signal down so that you cannot clip the amplifiers even when you turn the system up to max. Okay, we'll talk about the keypads in a second, and we'll show you some examples of commercial installations. Okay, so this is how the keypads connect to the V66, and in a second we'll talk a little bit about the functions of the keypad. Now if you look at the back of the keypad, you'll see that it has an RJ45 connector here, and there's 3 dip switches on the back as well. Now there's also a legend that's screened to the back of the PCB board, and it tells you zone 1 switches are up, up, down, zone 2 switches are down, down, up. So what you do is for zone 1 through 6, you set the dip switches accordingly. Now if you were to use 3 V66s, there's only 3 dip switches here, so you just set them up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, second amp 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, third amp 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the dip switches are the same for zone 1, but the system internally knows which is zone 1, which is zone 7, which is zone 12. So that's pretty basic. You just take a Cat6 cable and you can crimp them yourselves. And like I said before, it's 568A or 568B. We prefer 568A, but there's really not that much of a difference. Now this Cat 6 run can be 250 to 300 feet for each keypad, so that's a fairly long distance that you can run this Cat 6. Now the Cat 6 then terminates at what we call the hub, and the hub comes with the V66 kit. It's completely included, and you'll notice that there's 7 connectors on the back and 1 connector on the front. So your 6 keypads would then be connected to these jacks down here, and they're all paralleled, so you don't have to worry about putting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They can go in any order. So let's just plug in our keypad here right now, and oops, there we go. And so then we plug in our 6 keypads like this. The top jack goes to the amplifier. Also, the front jack can go to the amplifier. Now, the reason we do this is that if you're using the hub in a wall, you would put this in a wall, a single gang box, and you would use the front jack then to run to the back of the amplifier. But if you're using this in the back of a rack, an equipment rack, it may not be feasible for you to connect to the front jack, so we provide an additional paralleled back jack that gets connected to the back of the amplifier. Now let's take a look at the keypads in action. Okay, so let's look closely at the V66 keypad, and I can show you the type of control that this unit provides. Now, in this rack we have basically an 8-zone system set up here, this would be something that you would do in a hotel or a restaurant, where you would have different zones, and each keypad controls the volume, treble, bass, and source in each zone respectively. And it's very simple. You can put these into a rack plate, and we sell these rack plates, by the way, and then you can just label each zone above here, and so anybody can use this system. It's very, very simple. Let's take a close look at the keypad in action. So let's start off with our center button. This center button turns the keypad on and turns the keypad off. It also, by pressing it repeatedly, will cycle through the volume setting, the source selection, so you can see we're on source 4, our treble setting is 0, our bass setting is 1, and we can change these just by going up, using the up and down keys. So -1 for bass, or +3 for bass, or most people would turn that all the way up. But anyways, so that's our source selection. Now, that's our multi-selector. Now, if we want to select different sources, just press the side buttons, and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. And obviously you're going to be in the zone, you're going to be able to hear what's playing at that time. So source 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and it just keeps cycling around. So it's very simple, very easy to use. Now, if we go to our volume selection, then we just go up and down with these 2 keys to select our volume in the zone. And it's very simple and easy to use. There's also an IR receiver built into each one of these keypads. So if we wanted to use the IR remote control, we can turn the keypads on, we can turn them off, and let's just try that right now. There we power down some keypads, and we power up some keypads with the IR remote. Now, if you're using this in a residential application at home, each keypad would be in its respective room. So when you use your remote control, you're only affecting the one keypad, not all keypads. Now, when the zones are turned off, you'll see that the keypad goes dark, except for the center power light, and that provides a little night light, a very soft glow night light that you can use in your kids' bedrooms, what have you. And you'll see that the buttons on the keypad have a very tactile, responsive feel. So you don't have to press them multiple times. One little press, you feel a little click, and the keypad turns on automatically. One other thing I will mention is that the V66 remembers all of your settings all the time. So whenever I turn the system off, it's going to automatically come back on to my exact settings that I had when I was using the system the last time. Let's take a closer look at the amplification built into the V66. These are class-leading amplifiers. They're Class D, but what we use is a huge toroidal power supply to provide lots of current to the amplifiers, so that when you're running all 6 zones flat out, the system never bottoms out, it never distorts, and it never overloads. So each amplifier is 4 ohm stable, which means that you can connect 2 speakers to the left, 2 speakers to the right, and have up to 4 speakers in any zone. That means that you could have up to 24 speakers connected to the V66. That's a lot of speakers. So in larger rooms like great rooms and rec rooms, it's no problem to put 4 8-inch speakers in the ceiling and connect them to the V66. It gives you more power. Now the V66 provides 50 watts per speaker run at 4 ohms. That's 100 watts per zone. And when you flip the amps to bridge mono, you're going to get 100 watts at 8 ohms bridge mono. As I mentioned before, the V66 can be used in commercial, background music and paging applications in restaurants, bars, hotels, what have you. It's really at home in a residential install. One other thing I wanted to mention for all the dealers out there that are Control4 dealers, RTI dealers, we have free Control4 drivers, so when you buy a V66 you get the driver for free. Compass Control, which is a key digital product, they've done extensive work with the V66 and they have a free driver if you buy Compass Control. So we're there to support you when you integrate the V66 into your existing installations. But let's go take a look at a real live residential install where the V66 is being used. So this is an example of a V66 residential application where the customer has installed 6 zones of audio in their house. Now, if you look over here, there's a keypad on the wall. This is the V66 keypad. You can control the audio very simply just by walking up and touching the keypad, or using your IR remote control, or your smartphone. So with the V66, you can have different songs playing in different rooms of the house, all simultaneously, different volumes, different treble, different bass. It's like having 6 independent stereo systems. Now this homeowner did something unique in their great room. They have a large great room here, and they've installed 6 K8 factor speakers in the ceiling and 2 subwoofers on the floor. The system is invisible, but it rocks. With the V66, you can listen to any type of music you want in any room of your house, all simultaneously, like cooking in the kitchen. Or lounging in your living room.
It sure is hard to leave you, Carrie, but it's really not my home.
Or chillaxing in your personal sanctuary. Thanks a lot for joining us today, and for more information on our products, please visit us at www.factorelectronics.com.